Hi guys, welcome down to Finch Friday, your weekly golf Q&A. And as always, loads and loads of questions have come in via social media. Thank you so much for those. So I'm going to pick out 5 that I've not really answered too much before and then answer them forthwith. So first question here on Instagram from Pedzilla. Do you think any of the other big golf brands will bring out one length irons? I love the Cobra length irons and love the videos. Thank you very much. So remember, Cobra only brought out the one length irons. Literally the only reason they brought those out is because they signed Bryson DeChambeau. I might be wrong. If anyone from Cobra is watching this, please feel free to jump into the comments. But the only reason that they brought those out is because they signed a player who specifically uses one length irons. If they'd have signed someone else who was using conventional progressive length irons, then that would not have happened. At the end of the day, they have sold very, very well. Now, the set that I'm using at the moment, so the one length forged, really good, very, very happy with them. If I stay with the one length irons, I'm not going to be 100% sure. I don't think switching back to progressive length is going to be that much of an issue, if I'm being honest with you. And it would be interesting to see how my scores improve or get worse if I do change back to a normal progressive length. I have to say, using the one length irons, my scores seem to have stabilized a little bit more, but that might just be coincidence with the extra practice I've been doing. If you do want to give them a go, I would recommend it. It's an interesting look of a club, certainly with the shorter irons. When you set down a pitching wedge and it's a 7-iron length, it gets a little bit weird. However, for a lot of people, it can do a lot of good. Okay, question here from Litter Tray. Does the makeup of your bag change when you are playing in the winter/autumn? I.e. less lofted driver if it's windy, or a more lofted if you know you won't get any rollout from muddy ground? Or do you add an extra hybrid and drop a long iron? Those kind of things. So when it gets into the winter months, for most people, unless you're living in a desert environment, the ground is going to be soggy. It is going to be muddy, and if you are hitting a low ball flight, once it lands, it is simply not going to be rolling that far. In general, most modern drivers, for example, and fairway woods, you can adapt. So they've got adjustable hosels, they've got movable weights. So if you did want that little bit more launch to try and carry it that little bit further, then that is possible within a modern golf club. Generally speaking, I don't really change my setup that much during the winter. The way that modern golf is going anyway, you want that extra carry through the air. What makes players like Rory, Justin Thomas, these big hitters of the golf ball so remarkable is not the fact that they pitch it and then run it out a long way. It's the fact that they carry it such big distances all year round. I know they obviously play in nice weather all year round, well, mostly, unless you go to the Irish Open, the Scottish Open, then you never know what's going to happen. But generally speaking, most of the modern golfers will hit the ball a long way through the air and get minimal amounts of run out. When I played the British Masters Pro-Am the other day, on the 3rd hole, which is a long par 3 up the hill, as it was played in the British Masters, there was a cross bunker about 260 yards in the middle of the fairway, quite a steep uphill to get there. Now, I managed to just carry it and then just get a little bit of rollout. Rory, when he played it, carried about 60 yards over it, hitting it so far through the air that when it landed, it didn't roll out. That is the type of ball flight that you should be aiming for, and that is the type of ball flight which is possible with more modern clubs. But to ensure you get the right setup, no matter what type of weather conditions you're facing, no matter what time of year it is, that's where getting fitting matters. And of course, having a swing that can hit it 300 yards plus through the air, which is, not easy. So this question from Bailey_GX. Opinions on rangefinders and what's the best? IYO? Rangefinders are an interesting part of the golf market because this year there's a few new models come out, so from Nikon, from Bushnell as well. I always find it interesting because when you are selling a driver, so if you're a golf company selling a driver, you can point to more features, you can point to more benefits, and you can sell the story of it being a better club. Even if it is the case with most modern drivers, the distance isn't that great of an improvement, the forgiveness isn't that much more forgiving. But with a rangefinder, you just need something which is going to zap the target, give you a reading, and you can't really improve that too much. These rangefinders are accurate. The laser rangefinders, so the Bushnells, Nikon, whatever, they're accurate to a very large distance, much larger than the biggest par 5 hole you're going to hit, to within a yard. Now, you're not going to be able to improve that year on year on year. Now, if you're thinking more about a GPS device, so a Sky, Caddy, something like that, those type of devices, you can add more features as far as what it visually looks like, so the software. But really, if you buy a rangefinder from a couple of years ago, a Bushnell or a Nikon, it's not going to be any worse than what it is at the moment. Having said that, my personal preference is towards Bushnells, but that's just because what I've used. There is absolutely no data to say that a Bushnell is going to be better than Nikon or any of the other cheaper versions out there. The best thing to do is when you go in a golf shop, just ask if you can take a couple of demo units, literally just go outside the shop, test them against each other, and if the cheaper version gives the same readings to within a couple of yards of a Bushnell, then what more do you need? Question here from the new Al Rimmer. Don't know what happens to the old Al Rimmer. Do you think changing your club so much sometimes has a negative effect more than a positive? And do you also think this is why Rory has had such a difficult season? I think changing your clubs a lot can have a negative effect. I think a lot of people change their clubs to try and improve, and that doesn't always work. I mean, you've got the classic example of the guy at the club, every couple of weeks has a new driver in the bag, expecting it to go further, straight or whatever, without actually being bothered to fix the underlying reason, the fact that he can't drive, which is his technique, his swing. I think changing golf clubs for the very best players in the world can have a very short-term negative effect. So if you think of when Mickelson changed from Titleist to Callaway at the Ryder Cup, that was an absolute disaster. But with Rory, changing clubs had a negative effect in respects that when he was testing out the new gear, that's when he had his stress fracture of the rib. So his season hasn't been great, but that's more down to injury than actually the change in equipment. So I think there's a short-term negative for the very best players, but for the general golfer, I don't think there's really that much of a difference. If you really want to improve and you really want to get better, the equipment that you use can have an effect, but mostly you need to improve technique, you need to improve your overall game. But by now, if that is a new revelation to you, then you probably haven't been paying attention to what's going on. This isn't a big secret. To improve your golf, it is not just a case of getting new clubs, it's a case of improving your technique. But I'm a golf coach, I would say that. Question here from Luke McMahon. Do you think they should change the President's Cup after last weekend? Do you also think the USA will dominate the Ryder Cup for the next few years? Hashtag Finch Friday. So, final result of the President's Cup, which was played at Liberty National, which looked absolutely fantastic. I didn't get to watch as much of it as I would have wanted. I was pretty busy working, but from the highlights that I saw and, of course, the overall score, the US team just absolutely dominated. It was only the last day when the actual international players seemed to turn up in mass, when really the result was never in doubt. After the first 3 days, it was always clear that the US were going to come out victorious. But the final score was 19-11. Do I think it needs to change? Probably not. These things are very cyclical. So you get a US team at this moment in time that is full of very, very, very good players. I mean, to read out this US team, you got Kevin Chappell, who has been consistently up and around the top 10s, top 20s, not as many wins as he would have liked. Justin Thomas, obviously FedEx Cup champion, incredible year. Daniel Berger, great talent, been injured. Kuchar, we know all about. Charlie Hoffman, Patrick Reed in team events, God, we know all about him. Dustin Thomas, who the hell's Dustin Thomas? Dustin Johnson, world number one, not a bad play. Brooks Koepka, a little bit of a man crush. Jordan Spieth, even more of a man crush. Kevin Kisner scares me, Terminator eyes. Phil Mickelson, past his prime, you would say, on his way out, but still an incredible talent. And then Ricky Fowler, that is a team that is just unbelievable. And you look at the international team, so you got Leishman, steady player in parts. Jason Day, obviously fantastic player for world number one, former world number one. Hideki Matsuyama looks like he is going to be a world number one. But when you actually look down that list and you compare them, you've got to say the US team was just incredibly stronger on paper, and that's the way it came out. So when you look at these two teams on paper, the US team is just the stronger, world ranking-wise, performance-wise, current form-wise, better all round. The international team isn't as strong, but you would imagine that the international team over time will develop, it will get better. The fact is that the US team for quite a number of years, well, apart from the last 2 years, in team competitions haven't been great. I mean, Europe have been consistently beating them in the Ryder Cup, apart from last time round and then 6 years ago. But overall, this new crop of young American players that are coming through are incredibly strong, and you would put them as favourites at this moment in time for the Ryder Cup next year. But the European team, what that may be, if you put that against the international team, you probably also say the European team is stronger as well. So if the international team is to try and win one of these things, then it does need to improve in strength and depth overall. But I don't think the format should change. I think it's a good format, I think it's a good event, and I think it's growing in stature. Right guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel overall. Try and do Finch Friday every week. Sometimes it's not possible, but make sure you follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, where I do post the questions and you can get involved. So guys, thanks for watching, subscribe, follow me on everything else. I'll see you next time.